In the feds, once you've done over a certain amount of time, they mandate that you go to a halfway house because they feel like you need that transitional period between prison and home. Possibly the worst experience of the entire 18 and a half years that I did, that 6 months in the halfway house was the worst experience. The level of disrespect, non-caring, putting roadblocks in your path unnecessarily, I would have been so much farther ahead if the authorities had just let my family come get me at the gate and take me home and I move my life forward. Because the halfway house system, the community engagement has become a new product of mass incarceration. Due to finances, the prison authorities are seeing that they have to move people out of the prisons because it takes $35,000 a year to maintain a person in prison. So they're moving folks out of the prison into halfway house situations, sometimes on the street as an alternative sentence. Judges are sending people to halfway houses instead of sending them to prisons. But it's a prison without walls. It's a prison you're on the street and you're still in prison because of the restrictions, because of the invasive manner in which they treat you. If they send you home on the weekend, they may call you at 4 o'clock in the morning to make sure you're where you are. Well, if you call me at 4 o'clock in the morning, you're not only waking me up, you're waking the whole house up. Who calls somebody at 4 o'clock in the morning? Or if you get a job and they want to come to your job and question your supervisor about you, it tells all of your coworkers who didn't know you were a formerly incarcerated person who you are. So there are so many barriers to you coming home and being successful. If you have a drug case, you are denied Pell Grants. In 1994, we were in the process of attaining a bachelor's degree inside. Congress, in its infinite wisdom, cut off all the Pell Grants for prisoners. One of the reasons was because the prison guards union objected to us going to school. Their point of view was, we're working hard to send our kids to college while the prisoners are going to college for free. That shouldn't be. Congress listened to that powerful lobbying voice and cut off all Pell Grants. But what you had was a situation where individuals who were trying to change were denied access to knowledge. When a person goes to college, and I got my associate's degree while I was at Terre Haute Penitentiary, the professors came into the prison and every night we had classes. It was a wonderful experience. What college does, in addition to teaching you specific classes like psychology or whatever it is, it gives you a framework, a worldview. College teaches you how to learn and it shows you your place in the world and society. That was lost when they took that away. So what we did in Atlanta when that happened was we reached out to the University of Georgia State and convinced them to come in with professors, students, and activists and set up a non-accredited college program, and we taught ourselves. And those of us who were transferred to other prisons made that same move, and we kept those classes going, and we basically rehabilitated ourselves. So much of the work that I'm doing now on the outside was learned inside the walls. I call myself a ghetto social worker because the social work that we do is reality-based, and it's the same things that we taught inside, I'm now teaching outside. It's just, now that I have my bachelor's degree and I'm working toward my MSW, I sound so much smarter. But it's the same thing, you know. It's the reality of real life situations. What we do is we attack the transition of folks coming home from prison. And it may be something as simple as a guy comes home, he wants to reconnect with his family, but his wife has moved on. And that's the reality. If you do 4, 6, 8, 10 years in prison, a female has moved on to something else. When I came home after 18 years, my younger sister, who's like my social conscience and like the voice of our family, she gave me some very good advice. She said, you have to fit into the structure that is now. You aren't the godfather of the family anymore. Your kids are grown, they have kids, they have their own lives. You have to fit into their world. And I bent over backwards to do that in the same way that all the years I was incarcerated, I did superhuman things just to stay in her life. But a lot of guys who come home with the idea that they're going to take over that same role that they left. But that role has altered and changed. Maybe there's a new man in that home who's raising your kids, and there's conflict. We've got guys who have committed new crimes because they can't live up to the expectations of a family. Of kids who feel like, all right, Dad, you've been gone for years and years, now you're home, where are all the material things that a father's supposed to give? But when you first come home, you're not in that position. And people who you grew up with, went to high school with, who never were incarcerated are much farther ahead of you. They have houses, cars, credits, because they have lived a civilian life. You have to fit into a world that may have passed you by for the years you were incarcerated, and you're entering a new reality. And people have to deal with that reality. And also many times, we suffer from post-traumatic stress syndrome. And that's real. And you need counseling, and you need peer support. And you need to recognize that the way you used to live is not the way that you live now. If someone come in front of you in the chow line, that's an offense. You might stab somebody for that. You can't do that at Wendy's. It's a different thing. And technology has moved so fast. In 2009, I got my first cell phone. My first cell phone. Because when I went to jail, cell phones were like, backpacks, where you had beepers. So it's a technology. It's going to computer class. It's becoming acclimated to the world as it is now. And that's often a very difficult thing. It's also developing the mentality that nothing in this outside world can make you commit another crime and go back to prison. So all the promises that you made to your kids and your mother and your dad and your wife, you have to fulfill those promises. And you have to do whatever is necessary to move that forward. And that may mean taking a job that's far beneath what your abilities are. When I first came home, I had an associate's degree. I was skilled, I was hyped. I'm gonna come home and get a great job. And for 4 months, I looked for a job and I couldn't find anything. And the jobs that I found, the halfway house wouldn't let me due to some arcane regulations. So they told me that on January 1st, 2010, if I didn't have a job, they were gonna send me back to prison. And every 15 days, like once you're home for the first month, every 15 days that you don't find a job, you get a write-up. And if you get so many write-ups, they send you back, which is crazy. You're gonna send me back to prison for not finding a job, but I found 3 jobs and you told me I can't have those jobs. But that's the ridiculousness of the system. And it frustrates so many people, and they begin to slip back into patterns of behavior because they know how to make money. Also, so many jobs were not well-paying jobs. And when you have guys who are used to making serious money, and then you ask them to work for minimum wage, that might be a starting point, but it can't be a progression. A man or woman with kids can't work for minimum wage. We have to create jobs that are living wage, jobs that give dignity, so you're able to take care of yourself and take care of your family. I have a friend who I did 12 years with in Atlanta, who went back to jail for a robbery, and he called me from jail, and the reason he did the robbery was because he was in the mall with his son, and his son wanted a pair of Jordans, and he couldn't buy them. He'd been home for 2 years, and he said, Jay, I'm home 2 years, and I can't buy sneakers for my kid. I just said, forget it. I'm not doing this anymore. And he went and did a robbery, and the robbery didn't work out, and he got 15 to 60, and now he's in the state system for another 15 years, and he's 42 years old. And that was just pure frustration. He had talent, he had ability, but he didn't have patience. So we teach our people patience, endurance, critical thinking. Critical thinking skills are lacking in many young people of color. Risk ratios, they have no idea what that is. We speak about that in our class. I said, what are you talking about? Risk ratio. Well, you're selling drugs and you're making X amount of dollars every day, every week, every month. But that's very short term. And your risk of going back to jail and then getting a sentence is very high. While we were incarcerated, we used to do exercise. We asked the young guys to write down all the money you made, all the cars you had, everywhere you traveled to, put a monetary value on everything you did in your criminal lifestyle. And they loved that part of exercise. You know, they grabbed the tablets and they write up all the money. Yeah, I had this, I had that. You know, some of it was lies. But a lot of it was true. And they would tabulate all that with their calculator, come up with a figure. This is what I made. Wow, I was balling. Look at this. Then we asked them to divide that number into your sentence. The years the judge gave you, the months, the weeks, the days, and then when you total all that up, do the hourly rate. So what are you making per hour if you got a 20-year sentence and you made $300,000 doing crime? Invariably, they're working for less than minimum wage. Some of them far less than minimum wage. You mean to tell me I'm making $3 an hour? Yes. That's that risk ratio. You risk your life for a materialistic goal, and now your family's doing without you. Your kids are growing up by themselves. Your parents are getting old. And to top it off, you're working in a prison factory and they're paying you 44 cents an hour and they're making millions of dollars. Then they begin to see where critical thinking comes in. And so the same things that we taught inside, we teach on the outside. But on a broader level, we teach history. We show how slavery led to Jim Crow laws, which led to the start of mass incarceration. And that mass incarceration is an outgrowth of slavery. We show them the 13th Amendment, which says that slavery has been abolished in the continental USA except for punishment for a crime. So that when you do crime and you go to jail, you are legally a slave of the system. And that's the reality. Slavery was not abolished in 1865. It merely transformed to a more insidious form. And mass incarceration is an outgrowth of that. So when we talk about mass incarceration, and part of the work that we do is education of the public. Yes, direct services is a very important part of our mission. Helping those who are coming out of incarceration, which is re-entry. We do pre-entry, which is trying to assist those who are in the trial process. We go into court with them, with the lawyers, and try to convince the judges to give them alternative sentences or less time. And we do work inside of the prisons. We go into the prisons to teach and to work and to encourage and to make sure that people are taking good advantage of the time when they're inside. When I have a young man who sits in my office and I say, how long you been inside? He says, 8 years. And I say, well, look, here in your file says you don't have a GED. No, I don't. You were inside 8 years. Why don't you have a GED? We have to make good use of the time when we're inside. For real transition, we talk about transformation and transition. You can't have a good transition unless you're in the process of transforming your life. And that's the reality. If you're in prison for a reason. And your life is off the rails, it's off the track. So you have to identify what you need to do to bring your life and your principles and your morality and your ethics back into the confines of society. I have some material here that is, we have a 15-week program that we teach. And some of our classes are life skills, behavior change, critical thinking, ethics. And the guys say, ethics, what do you mean? Yes, you need a moral code, and you don't have that. Building strong relationships, parenting. We need to be good parents. If you are a real parent, you're not going to leave your children to fend for themselves. Family, social, and community responsibility. We ask our people to do work in the community, not as community service, but because it's necessary for you to see yourself as part of the greater whole. So when you come home, you are not just building a life for yourself as an individual, you're building a life for yourself, for your family, and for your community. Conflict resolution, anger management. That is the core of so much violence you see in the inner cities. Because our young people don't know how to resolve conflicts in a positive way, and they can't manage their anger. When you shoot somebody over a perceived insult, or because he looked at your woman, or he talked to your woman, or he said something on Facebook or on Twitter, how crazy is that? It's a momentary problem. And tomorrow or next week or next month, you won't even think about that. But if you take a gun and you shoot somebody over that, that's a life-altering circumstance. Now that person is dead, and you're in jail for the rest of your life or for 20, 25 years over one moment when you weren't thinking critically or exercising good judgment. Criminal relapse prevention. And we teach that like people teach drug relapse prevention. And that's the reality of it. Because before you commit a new crime, the physical act, you relapse in your mind. You start thinking about the money you used to have and the nightclubs and the girls, and you're broke, man, my pockets is flat. And you start to think about ways, well, if I just, get a package and I sell it, and I do it 2 or 3 times, I flip it, and I have like maybe $8,000, $9,000, and I open a little business. You start rationalizing ways for you to slip back into that lifestyle for a little while, but it's never a little while. Because once you start to make money illegally, money is money. The responsibilities of citizenship. What does it mean to be a citizen? We encourage our people to register to vote and to vote so they can affect change. There's 300,000 returning citizens that live in Philadelphia County. Why aren't we running the city? We should be electing the mayor, city council, state representatives, but we're not organized. We don't work in unity. One of the things we've done is we started the Block Party, which stands for Build, Lobby, Organize, Campaign. And we're trying to organize returning citizens in the city of Philadelphia and across the state into a economic, political, social voting force. If we all vote in the same directions, politicians have to come to us for our votes. And then we don't have to beg for programs. They will come to us and say, what kind of programs do you need? But it's very hard to convince individuals who have been dogged by the system for so long and have no belief in the system that this is beneficial. That's a part of our job. We advocate. Just like I'm doing here tonight with you, I travel all over the state and I speak to citizens with good hearts who see the problem and want to help. Or sometimes I'm speaking to folks who don't even realize the extent of the problem. I'll give you a stat that will probably blow your mind, because it blew mine when I first saw it. In the census of 1860, there were 3.9 million slaves in the lower South, in this country, in the system of slavery. In 2015, there are 7 million people who are involved in the system of mass incarceration in this country. And that's counting the 2.2 million that are physically incarcerated in county, state, and federal prisons, and all those who are on probation, parole, or in halfway houses all across the country. So there's almost 3 million more people in the system of mass incarceration now than was in slavery in 1860. That's an incredible statistic. And most people don't see that, don't understand that, and they don't see the reason for it. But when a system is generating $80 to $90 billion a year, it's very hard to dismantle that system. And it's a system that is working 24/7, 365 days a year to maintain itself. And how are we combating it? With volunteers, with small staffs, with good-hearted citizens who donate what they can so our organizations can move forward. We need to mobilize ourselves and fight as hard against the system as they fight to maintain it. And we need to look at alternatives to prisons. I belong to Decarcerate PA, which is an organization that has 3 main tenets. 1, no new prison cells in the state of Pennsylvania. 2, decarceration of prison, which means alternative sentences, finding ways to keep offenders from going to prison, and also to promote inside of the prison a healing atmosphere. Prisons could be laboratories where those who are damaged are brought back to mental, physical, and moral health, and then released back into society. Instead of being a place where it is punishment, coercion, and folks come out hard into the system and commit more crimes. And the third principle is to take some of the money that's allocated to corrections and divert it to the community. In 2013, we walked from Philadelphia Love Park to Harrisburg. It took us 10 days. We were protesting the fact that they closed 23 schools in the city of Philadelphia, while at the same time they allocated $400 million to Phoenix 1 and 2 prison expansion. So what were they telling our communities? That incarceration is more valuable than education. We have to fight against that kind of mentality. As citizens, we have to understand our responsibility, because it's our tax dollars. It's politicians that we vote for. It's a system that we allow to be in place that needs to be dismantled. And it can only be dismantled if the weight of the persons in society are brought to bear. When you look at the civil rights movement, when the civil rights movement started, and this month we're honoring the memory of Dr. King and all those who worked so hard to change our lives, think about what the country was in the 1940s and the 1950s and what it is now. It's a vast change. I was born in 55, so I grew up during the civil rights movement and the Black Power movement. And trust me, the world that my grandkids live in today, they have no idea what it was like in those days. And it's good they have no idea. But they need to look back and honor and respect the sacrifices made by those who worked so hard to change it. The civil rights movement transformed this country. Well, the movement against mass incarceration and the movement for social justice is a movement similar to that. And you see it burgeoning all over the country. The Black Lives Matter movement. The reality in this country is that black lives have never mattered. And that's the reality. It's a hard thing to say, but there's truth in that statement. From the time that the first slaves set foot on the soil of America, our lives have never mattered. All through slavery, Jim Crow, the Black Codes, through the Civil Rights Movement, and even now, when a young man can be shot 16 times, when a woman can make a phone call to the police because her neighbor is mental, and the police come and they shoot the mental patient and the person who made the phone call. That would never happen in a white suburban neighborhood. So we have to look at how our country is structured and what can we do to change it. Because if we don't have our hand in the change, we are condoning it. That's the reality. So when you talk about mass incarceration, social injustice, and the history of this country, we have to decide, are we going to be a part of this movement? Are we going to be an individual that says, this is not right, and whatever I can do to help to affect that change, I'm going to do and I'm going to support. And many things are pressing against us. I was just looking at the news 2 days ago when a black Muslim ran up on a police car and he shot into the police car. Everybody see that on the news? Well, the mayor of Philadelphia had a press conference and he told the truth. He said, what happened here was an act of one person. This does not represent Islam or the Islamic community. You need to go on Facebook. You need to go on the internet. You need to go online and see the hate and the vile statements that are being directed against Mayor Kennedy. Folks are actually calling for his resignation, calling him all kind of names, calling him a Muslim, all kind of things. Because he spoke a simple truth. Because if a white person shot a policeman, we're not going to blame the entire community. If a black person shot a policeman, we don't say all black people are terrorists. So if a Muslim does it, you can't say that all Muslims are terrorists. You have to look at the individual acts of every person who transgresses the law. That's a simple truth. But in this country, when people speak simple truths, they are vilified. So we have so many issues to deal with. But we feel as if, as thinking people, to promote change, we look and see, what can we do? Change begins one person at a time, one family, one community center. People say there are no leaders. Malcolm X is gone, Martin is gone. There's no strong, effective leaders. That's ridiculous. I see leaders every day. I see kids being taken to school by loving parents. I see teachers, educators, community activists, pastors, reverends administering to their flock, moving them in the right direction, teaching principles that build community and that make a better world. This is the work that the Center for Returning Citizens is engaged upon. It's the work that we're doing. Questions?